We hope you enjoyed this teaching from Christ Church Birmingham. More teaching can be found at www.christchurchbirmingham.org.
Well, this term as a church, we've been preaching through what's called the Sermon on the Mount. And this is the largest chunk of teaching from the mouth of Jesus that is recorded in any of the Gospels. And it's probably the most incredible sermon and words ever preached. And Jesus is teaching his disciples. He's on a hillside. He's speaking to them. But those around in the crowd can hear what he's saying. They're kind of listening in. And we can listen in today to the words of Jesus. And throughout this sermon, Jesus compares the life of a true disciple, a follower of Jesus, with what he's seeing around him from religious authorities of his day. And rather than fake, superficial religion for the sake of impressing others, Jesus shows us what it is like to love God and what it is to truly live for him. Amy brought some excellent teaching last week. I wasn't with you, but it was absolutely amazing. And I've seen her notes as well, and the PowerPoint. I'll try to do a good PowerPoint. And so this morning we're going to be looking at Matthew 5, verses 13 to 16. If you've got your Bible with you, you can turn there. But otherwise, the words will appear on the screen behind me. And it's going to help us in order to understand what it is to be a Christian. And how is it that we should be living differently. So Matthew chapter 5 from verse 13, it says this: You are the salt of the earth. You. Just, I know it's rude sometimes in some cultures to point, but just point to somebody and say you. 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 You are the salt of the earth, Jesus is saying. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You. Turn to everybody, say you. You. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on the stand and gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Now, the theme of these verses that we've just read is how Jesus' disciples and how we, as followers of Jesus today, relate to the wider culture which we live in. See, throughout Christian history, Christians have often gone to two different extremes. They've said we should not be in the world. So we should go ourselves away and just pray by ourselves, put walls up, let's live in a monastery, and that's just separate us from the world. That's just pray and be part of that. But that's keep totally separate from the world. Then, of course, we have others who said, well, I love being a Christian, but I just want to enjoy the world. God has created everything. So I'm just going to enjoy and party, do what I like. And often, it can spring between the two. Some of us who are older, I'm not that old, but some of you may be, would remember even like in the 50s and 60s, in some churches, it was a sin to go to the cinema. Even to watch Bambi, because the cinema was secular and film was secular. You weren't allowed to go and dance. And you weren't even allowed to dance in church because dance was of the devil. And so you can go through these two extremes. And for what that means is some Christians even today can stay in a Christian bubble. They can just go to church, read the Bible. They kind of go to work but don't really connect with the people, and they just pray all the time, or they just go to Bible studies, and they don't mix, and they don't have much influence with anybody. And then, of course, you can have those who just turn up on a Sunday, but the rest of the week, well, I'm just enjoying what the world has to offer. So what Jesus is saying here is something very different than that. Jesus is telling us here that as Christians, we are to be in the world and making a difference, but also, as we do that, to be distinct and very different from the world around us and the culture. And this morning I want to look at 4 things that we can learn from out these powerful words of Jesus. The first thing about us, about disciples of Jesus, followers of Jesus, is that we need to be different. Salt is different from the meat it's put on. Light is different from the room that it illuminates. They both stick out, they don't blend in. They get noticed. And that's what makes them valuable. See, disciples of Jesus are so different from the culture around us. As Amy reminded us, we are poor in spirit, while the world is arrogant and boastful and self-sufficient. We grieve over sin, while the world celebrates sin. We're gentle and hungry and thirsty for righteousness and merciful and pure in heart and makers of peace and are persecuted. Or as living of disciples of Jesus, that's who we should be. And if we're like that, we will stick out, we will be different. And that's the point, because we are called to be both salt and light. We're supposed to be different. Our difference is what makes us valuable. Now, of course, salt in the ancient world, in the context this was speaking, that was before we had electricity and fridges. And salt was used as the main way to preserve food, to stop food rotting. It was a preservative that stopped the meat going mouldy. And salt actually was so valuable in the time that Jesus was speaking. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid with special salt rations. Rather than just a currency, they were given some salt because that's how valuable it is. In fact, the word salary, anybody gets a salary or have had a salary? You know, you have a job. Salary comes from that word of salt, because you were paid a salary. So that's why the phrase, the English phrase, says somebody's not worth their salt. Have you heard that phrase? It's not a phrase we use very often, but it's a phrase. They're not worth their salt. They're not worth their salary. They're not valuable. Because salt was valuable. To be told that we are the salt of the earth is to be told we are valuable and useful. The world needs us, and Jesus needs us too, and he uses us. And as the salt of the earth, we're both valuable and useful to God's work and to his world. And of course, salt is used to bring out the flavour of food, isn't it? I am a bit of a salt freak. I have salt on everything. I love salt. Even in my ice cream, salted caramel. It just brings out the flavour of caramel. For you, it might be a different spice or herb, depending on your culture. But actually, in most cultures, salt is added and it brings out flavour. It's meant to elevate, isn't it? It's meant to lift something. Because, see, life can be flat. It can be empty, purposeless. Because of this, people seek pleasure and addictions to try and add a bit of spice to their lives. But when they can see somebody with real purpose, real confidence, security, peace, freedom, they can start to think, there's something different about that person. There's something flavoursome, if you can say, about that person. And of course, I don't know if you know, I'm not a biologist. We do have people who are like that here. But salt, I've understood, is a necessary element for the blood and the life of the human body. Is that true? Dave, is that true? Yeah, chemistry-ish. Salt actually creates a craving for water in the human body to rehydrate. So sodium is a good thing. That's what our bodies have. Too little sodium in the body can create dehydration because there's nothing to transport the water to the cells. Well, here's the reality. And we sang it a bit in the song about the darkness of the world. The world is spiritually dehydrated. You and me, by our lives, can create a thirst for God. A thirst for something greater. See, if we live such a full Christian life that when others see it, they will begin to see there's something different about you. Your life can become attractive to them. Not because you have the nicest house or a great career. Actually, most of us don't even have those things. But because we live with great purpose, because we have a greater purpose beyond what the world often sees as important. By the things that you do and the things that you say and the ways you respond to people, we can display something so different. And God's desire for us as his people, and for each of us, as a follower of Jesus, is that we would be that salt, that taste of heaven. You can be the taste of heaven in your family. You can be the taste of heaven in your community. The taste of heaven in your city. The saltiness, the difference that you can bring. We are the preservative of the world. See, our culture cannot salt itself. Left to itself, it will just decay and deteriorate. We can sometimes see in our beautiful city decay as well, can't we? We're thankful for all the beauty of our city and the beauty of its people. But we also see decay. We also see deterioration. And sometimes we can blame that on the culture, the world, or politics, or people, or situation. But do you know what? Politics can help change things. Governments can help change things. People doing wonderful things who don't know Jesus can do wonderful things to help. But Jesus is saying we are the salt. We are the preservatives. We are the ones that can make a difference. I like what John Stott said, an old Anglican preacher. He said this: God intends us to penetrate the world. That means to get involved. Christian salt has no business to remain snugly in elegant little ecclesiastical salt cellars. Ecclesiastical means the church structures, the religiousness, just there, staying there. He says this: our place is to be rubbed into secular community, as salt is rubbed into meat to stop it going bad. And when society does go bad, sometimes we tend to throw up our hands in horror and reproach the non-Christian world, but rather, sometimes we should reproach ourselves. We should warn ourselves. One can hardly blame unsalted meat for going bad. It can't do anything else. That's what happens. The real question we should ask is, where is the salt? Where is the salt? We are the salt. Where is the salt that is stopping the decay in Birmingham, in the world, in the world? And the idea of being different, sticking out, is especially challenging given what Jesus said in verses 10, 11 and 12, as Amy reminded us about persecution. See, if following Jesus makes things hard, then it's going to be tempting, as we're going to read about this light being put under a basket. We want to cover up the light. We don't want to attract attention to ourselves. We don't want to be that salt. We don't want to stand up. However, a disciple that blends in with everything else is just an unsalty salt that in this verse it says it's not really used for anything. As Jesus said in verse 13, Jesus calls his followers to be noticed. So we're called to be different. Secondly, of my four things, disciples of Jesus influence the world. See, the second lesson for us is that the disciples of Jesus will influence the world. Just think about what salt and light do. They change things. We've already said that salt makes things taste better. And it keeps meat from going bad. Light changes a room dramatically. It's so easy nowadays, isn't it, to have light? Most of us have a torch in our pocket on our phone, don't we? Most of us have a lamp or a light switch by our bed. We can take light for granted. We have street lights. We can have headlights on our cars. We can play football under floodlights. But of course, in the time of Jesus, there was no electricity. There was no internet. Light was valuable. You could not just walk into a room and flip a switch. You had to be prepared. You had to get your oil. You had to be prepared. We're told we are the light of the world. We are important, valuable. Jesus calls us to be a light in our home, in our church, in our community, in our city. And he tells this light not to be hidden under a bowl. We all have a little light to shine. Had I been more prepared, I would have got you to sing a wonderful song, which I bet you could sing straight off, about a little light shining. Does anybody know it? I bet your mum knows it. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. I'm not going to sing gospel because I can't sing the gospel. But we've all got little lights and we are called to shine. See, some of us might think we've not got much to offer. I don't actually have much time or energy. I don't really have any obvious skills or talents. But God tells us, each one of us has enough light to make a difference, to shine in the world. Just imagine a little candle has enough light to shine the light. It might not shine right over there, but it can direct our path. You, with your little light, can shine, you can make a difference. Even the smallest light is a welcome sight in a dark place. See, what does light do? Light conquers darkness. See, darkness is a non-entity. This doesn't really exist. Darkness is actually just the absence of light. Darkness has no ability to overcome the light. That's what John says in John 1 verse 5. It says, the light shone in the darkness and the light could not get away with the light. Light also uncovers and reveals beauty. When we let our light shine, we uncover and reveal some of the beauty and the glory of God. And that's what Jesus meant in Matthew 5:14. I love what the Message translation says this. It says, here's another way to put it. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colours in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. Disciples of Jesus make a difference in the world. They have an influence on their environments. The word pictures of salt might tell us that we're going to make a difference. And history is full of men and women who've made an incredible difference in the world just by following Jesus and being faithful to him. You know, I wonder if you think about the churches that we've planted, think about friends in other churches, Christians you know in our city and wider. I wonder if we suddenly stopped acting like Christians. We just started to live as we wanted to. Would anybody notice a difference? Would our city miss the influence that we have on our families and our workplaces, our social circles and local government? Would they miss our good works? All the Christians that run with outreach and food banks and toddler groups just open up and said, I'm not going to do that anymore. I hope, and I think there will be a difference. The answer should be yes. You're called to make a difference. You know, it should be dramatic as turning off a light switch if everybody didn't do it. It should leave everybody saying, what changed? Who turned out the lights? See, the good work that we're doing should leave a massive hole that would be very noticeable. And my third thing I look for is this. Disciples of Jesus are missional. They're on mission. This is the third lesson we can learn from these words of Jesus. We're on a mission with Jesus. And our mission is to be that salt of light. To let our good work shine so that they would glorify God. And this salt and light mission is for everyone, not just for a few of us. See, if we look at this passage, Jesus said, I'm glad you all want to follow me. Now a select few of you may be interested in joining my mission and make a difference in the world. No, he said, you are the salt. You are the light of the world. See, being a Christian is not about just going to church on a Sunday or praying by yourself occasionally at home. We're called to be salt and light. We're called to be different. That's why we live differently. That's why our relationships should look different. We love and care for people. So the Bible says, do not be yoked with unbelievers. That means to be yoked is to tie to. That's why as Christians, people who are of the world, they don't have the same vision and values for us. That's why we don't date non-Christians. That's why we don't marry non-Christians. Why? Because we're called to be different. Because we're to be light together. We're to shine. We're to be different. Jesus wants us to follow him, to be the salt and light, to make a difference, to be a difference. Jesus said, we are the light of the world. not the light of the church. If the only time we let our light shine is on Sundays, or occasionally we might express it in a different way, we essentially kind of put our light under a bowl, under a basket. We get to church and we think, oh, let's just take it off again. When we leave, let's just put it back on again. If Jesus was here in physical form today, Jesus would probably be found in places many of us wouldn't be called dead in, because he's one who brings light into darkness. One of my heroes of the faith is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was an incredible German-born Lutheran pastor who was at the beginning of Nazi rise in Germany, began to stand up as a salt and light in darkness, where the religious authorities were going along with what was happening. He stood up and actually died for his faith at the age of 39. But he said this: a community of Jesus which seeks to hide itself has ceased to follow him. We cannot hide. We must go into the world, not to be shaped by it, but to change it. A community of Jesus which seeks to hide itself. And we can hide itself, but we're not talking about Jesus, or we can so blend in. And that's the sadness of some parts of the church in this nation, where they just wanted to blend in with the culture, to be accept things that the culture is telling them. And actually the result is the light begins to diminish. And that's why you find, unfortunately, churches in the city closing. That's why there's churches and denominations that are just declining. Because what they've done is try to partner with the world and its values and its vision. That doesn't mean we should go to the other extreme and all we do is come shouty churches. And they do have churches like that. Go to the other extreme, who are always condemning, always pointing the finger. But actually we're called to be salt and light, to make a difference, not just shout. It's so easy on marches, isn't it? People go on marches to shout against something they disagree with. Most of us don't go and shout on marches to things we agree with. We do it when we're in opposition. But as Christians, we're to speak truth. We're to speak life. We're to encourage the good, not just speak against that which is bad. Because we're to be salt and we're called to be light. Let your light shine. And fourthly and lastly, disciples of Jesus are motivated by God's glory. And this actually last one gets to the very heart of sometimes when we don't care about making a difference in the world. It's because we think that life is all about us, our needs, our wants. We can think it's about our comfort and feelings, and our rights really matter a lot. We have examples even in this room of people who have chosen to be salt and light in their own nation, who have spoken about truth, and as a result that have been persecuted. We have the privilege of being in a nation where there's actually very little persecution of Christians. Some Facebook pages have tried to tell you otherwise. But why have they done that? Why have they stood up? Why have they spoken about Jesus? Why have they spoken truth to power? Because they're not doing it for their own comfort. They're doing it because they want to follow Jesus. This week, Open Doors, we're in Parliament talking about persecution, the most highly persecuted places in the world. The top ones always was North Korea. And then there's places like Somalia on that list, and parts of Nigeria, Iran, which is in the news at the moment. In Iran, those are the biggest revival we've seen. There's more people come to Christ in that nation than the other nation, although China might be comparable. But they go for persecution and challenge. But why do they do it? Because they not do it for their own comfort, because they realise they're salt and light. Now, there are times we keep quiet about our faith. We don't always put ourselves in danger. The problem is you can't hide under the light. It's going to shine through. And in our nation, we need to shine through. Sometimes that might get us into tricky situations. Many people have been tricked in thinking that Jesus came basically just to help us out, give us a comfortable life, make things easy, to make us feel better about ourselves. Maybe Jesus just came to be the cheerleader that we've never had. But this last phrase in verse 16 shows us from Jesus' perspective what it's all about. It says, in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So you and I were made in the image of God. From the very beginning, our whole purpose was to represent God on the earth, to give him glory in all that we do. Just like a statue can honour the person it was made of, you and I are made to be living statues of the living God, to display who he is, honouring him in everything we do, displaying who he is. And disciples of Jesus, we need to understand this. Jesus came and saved us and set us free from slavery to ourselves, and to cause us to see and love God's glory the way we should. 1 Peter 1 sums it up so well. Won't the band just come up? Ready? It says this. 1 Peter 1 verse 9. It says this. But you, turn to your neighbour, say you. You, turn to your other neighbour, say you. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Dear friends, I urge you, as foreigners and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires. We have sinful desires, to abstain from them, to choose to live life differently, to choose to live for Jesus, because they wage war against your soul. Live such lives among the pagans, the people who don't know Jesus, that they may accuse you of doing wrong, that they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Don't you want that for your home? Don't you want that for your street, your community, your town, your city? That people will see what God is doing in you. Despite some of us going through suffering and lack of energy and hard times, some of us, and even in the good times, but they will see God's presence as we're still alive. And they indeed will glorify God. They will come to know Jesus because of your story. Why don't we stand together? Your story, your testimony of God's grace and kindness. We have received mercy. What a joy.